All right, so let's go over what you need to do for your week 6 project. And for week 6, I'm adding on top of the content that we're getting and the skills that you're learning through the code along to include things that I think really are important to upgrade your skills and your code. Okay, so basically, I'm calling this project a semantic engineering refactor. Okay, now, and let's just kind of remind ourselves and let's look back here at what you just did on the code along. Okay, so for the code along, when I look at this in DevTools, and I highly have recommended if you're not using DevTools, you do, is notice Kevin has some sections, right? So sections are semantic elements. They actually give meaning to where if you drill down into section, he has a div. And so what I'm going to have you do is actually remove any divs that you have in your project right now. Now, some of you may not. I think I remember at least seeing one or two examples. So if you didn't, good on you. Then you just, just take this as, and you can do a commit saying I'd already done it. But again, you want to review this. Now, what is it you could use instead of a div here? Okay, because it has no meaning, but a section does. Well, I've pulled up and I'll provide a link to the semantic elements. Okay, so the one we've seen the most is section, but we've also used nav and main and header. Okay, and we're going to actually add some additional, and I've covered now in attendance, called fig and fig caption. Okay, now, and in this case, the things that I would probably add where that div is an article or an aside. Okay, these are very common that you can use as well because they actually tell when either a search engine or an accessibility client is actually reading your site, it gives it more meaning. Okay, some 100 semantic elements, right? So these are just the most common. So going back to here, so I would probably take this and add, in this case, I would look at the content and go down. Okay, so look at this content that's in this div here. Oh yeah, so this actually kind of looks like an article. We could call it an article, or it could be an aside. Actually, it might fall more into that. So it's not that it's necessarily wrong. It's just that I want you to play around with it because one of the things that happens is when you're implementing a div, you don't actually have to add headers. And you might go, and we actually did this in week 3, and this was an important part of what I gave you was some semantic code that was broken and you had to fix it. And so in this case, I want you to actually upgrade your HTML to be semantic and remove the divs. Now, it's not to say for later that we might come back around and add some, but it's just good to know. Now, one of the things, and you don't have to do this, but in DevTools, if you've ever noticed this little switch to accessibility, this actually looks at your page from actually accessibility DOM layout semantic elements. Okay, and this is great because it's like it starts to show you the different ways your page is actually viewed. So if you ever see that moving back and forth is good just to start getting an idea. Okay, so now let's actually talk about this in terms, and this is, the content I've provided here. So you must replace every div on your entire project with a descriptive HTML tag. So no more divs. Now we've already been using footer, right? We've already been using main and section, so it's really article and aside. Okay. Now again, I'm just listing these, but it's really, and within a section, you would add an article or an aside. So, and then the other thing we're going to add is actually every image needs to be wrapped in a figure. Okay, and figure tag, and I'll show you my example in a minute, and the corresponding fig caption, because just an image itself is the tag, but wrapping it in a fig, okay, and then having a fig caption makes it for a screen reader much more content to provide to somebody that may be listening to your site, and it's just good practice. Okay, so let me show you this on my side, but then you will do a commit. So here's my site. So here's an example of this, and I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit inspect. So what you can see here is I have a figure. So it's the fig, open fig, close fig. Then the image itself, you still have an alt. This is still important, okay, because basically it's serving two purposes. Right. One is giving a description of what happens, and the other one, which is a fig caption, then gives a little more context to it, right? And then I also included a photo credit, like where this came from. So this is a good standard for you to follow, right? Is the idea of having a fig, right? Figure, right? And then within the figure, that's a nested, having a fig caption, right? And so, and again, we will have covered some of this in attendance, so this is not completely new to you, okay? Actually, no, this actually will end up being attendance. So you'll actually see this and then you can ask questions. As a matter of fact, this will be a great time to go over and go to Figure, right? And look at how Figure is laid out and then the Fig caption as well. Okay, so this is good. Actually, I'm glad I remembered that actually this is going to serve as your attendance as well. Okay, so all of your images, all of the images for your site need to have been used a fig, and then it's a nested, and then used a fig caption in the way that I've shown you today. Okay. Now, the other thing is you're going to expand your site. You're actually going to add a fourth page. And this is really important because some of you, when you added your second page, had a little bit of a struggle with this. So I want to go through when you add a new page, what are the things you have to think about? Well, you have to generate content. You need to generate an image. You need to create a new page. And in this case, some of you just use page-2.html, but you actually want to name that page what it is, okay? And then for every page, you must have a link to your HTML. Now, I generally call that home. If you want to call it something, that just has to, and home is a generally recognized. You could call it, I don't know what else. Home page seems like too much. So generally we call it home, but then your other links will actually be for the specific topic of whatever that is. And again, I'll show you in a minute. Now, for the palette, and I said this before, and I think I only saw one student do this, the palette only goes in the footer and not on the main content. Okay, so when you're adding this page, you have to add the content, you have to add an image, and the image needs to follow the course, have the fig caption in here, still have the alt. Okay, so then you'll do a commit here. So let me show you again mine, okay, over here. Okay, so in this case, here's my new page, my VO2 Max. So here's my index page that says home, my already existing workout, right? Now, again, I've upgraded all of these to have that fig, right? So again, I could right click, hit inspect, see my fig, right? Which is within a section, okay? So my fig, my image, my alt, and then my fig caption. Now my new page also has a new one, follows the same standard, and and for every page you need to have each of your topic pages linked at the top. Okay. Now, and in this case, I'm just giving you the example of what you need to do here. Okay. So, and I didn't show it, but just to go back here, is that the palette is only linked at the bottom, but it also needs to include that as well. Okay, so then you would do that. Now, one of the things Kevin's going to introduce us to, and boy, is this important, is that you're going to use you're going to do the global reset and then change the way the box model is calculated. And you learned about this as box sizing border box. Okay, so now in this case, because we had used divs in the past, you're going to be refactoring to get rid of those divs, right? So you select one of your newly promoted semantic elements, right? And style it as a card component. So that means you're going to have to go through and modify how you wrote that. Okay, so you must have a distinct color now. So for mine, right? So let's go back here. I think I have one on actually several pages, right? So here, right? So and then here we go. right? So now I have a class for this. And this is also where you have learned this week about the logic of using a class and the benefit of using a class, but also you can see using them here as far as on the article, right? Okay, so in this case, what we're doing is we're creating not only using up styling that new semantic element, right? But we're also then refactoring all of our margins to make sure top and bottom that we're using logical, right? So margins block, start block, and what's something we saw that made more sense. It's a more contemporary way of doing this. So if you had any of those, you need to refactor them. And then this is what I was saying, use a utility class for some kind of highlighting, right? For key terms. Let's see, where did I do this? I think I did this on my homepage. Yeah, so I did it here as well, so that you can see. Now that was the link itself, so it was really in here. At least one, maybe two places you'd want to do that. Okay, so then you're implementing CSS engineering and styling the semantic components. Now, really important. Now you could do this along the way, but definitely at the end, you're going to want to validate, make sure all of your pages are validated. Every page, now you're adding a new one, right? Making sure your CSS, because that's what I do when I bring up in grade is I go through that. Okay, so in this case, if for some reason you had been doing it along the way, that's great. You can just add a note, right? Add a note into your CSS that says final HTML validation passed. And the only reason you would need to do this is if you had already been doing the work and you just needed to add a commit here at the end. Okay, so again, this is the benefit of actually going through the video, and then I show the grading as far as it's done. So we're covering what you're learning through Kevin's code along, but we're also taking some of the stuff we've been introduced to, but taking it to a new level, and we're adding more content, which, and this is what I was showing today, is the importance of having a consistent navigation, right? Having these semantic elements, using this Fig and Fig caption is really important, making sure everything validates, looking at once you reset that, do that global reset, making changes, styling that so that it looks good. And this is just part of what you're gaining this week in the code along, and then we're taking it into the project itself. Okay. All right, so this again, you'll use this video as your attendance, but I will have given you a short video just showing what you need to have done for the attendance, but you're also going to probably review this again for your project. I think that was all I needed to do. Let me just go back to it and make sure I've talked. Yeah, we're doing all this in your project, your HTML, you're expanding standards. Good. I think that's good. All right. Have a good one. Reach out for help if you need it.